Hey y'all, welcome to this week's assignment. What we're going to do in this assignment is create a new P5js sketch, a lot like what we did in class this past week, but we're gonna build on it a little bit, and we're going to kind of explore some of the different functions that we have available to us. The goal of this assignment is to get you working out the structure of a program, specifically a P5js program, and really with a focus on what those two required functions are for us to get a program running. And really, more generally, the idea of a function itself and how we can use functions to execute code throughout the system. So I'm here, we are in our editor, and I'm going to go ahead and create a new program. We're going to start from scratch. So I'm going to go ahead and right click within the File Explorer, or hit the plus option right here, or go to File, New File. What I like to usually do is just right click over here and say New File. Simple. So if we go to, we're going to name this sketch2.js, because I think we had a sketch1 in class, and hit enter. And now we should have a blank file. Now remember, what are those two functions that we need in order to create a P5js sketch? Setup and draw. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to write our setup function. So to declare a function, we're going to say function space setup, open and close parentheses, and then open and close curly brackets. There's a little bit of syntax there, but that's basically what you need in order for you to set up a function. Think of a function as a wrapper around a line of instructions or lines of code. And that wrapper is going to allow us to execute all of the code inside of it. Now, from a P5js perspective, P5js automatically calls or executes those lines of code when we execute our program. Now, typically in the setup function, the first thing we want to do, or the first instruction we want to create, is to set up our canvas, or to create our canvas. This function name, quite naturally, is called create canvas, open and close parentheses. Now, the case matters here, right? So you want to make sure that you have a capital C here and the lowercase c in the beginning of create canvas. Now, create canvas takes some inputs. We can give the function some information so that it knows how to do the job we're asking it to do, which in this case is to create a canvas, something we can draw on. So what we need to do is we need to give it a size. So we could say, let's give it a size of 500 by 500. That basically is saying, hey, I want a 500 pixel by 500 pixel space for me to draw on. Now, typically, the next thing that you're going to do when you're writing one of these programs is paint that canvas a specific color. So we can use the background function to do that. So if we say background, open and close parentheses, now we can give the background some color. We can give it a color in various different ways. The simplest way is to give it what we call a string, or just basic English. We could say background is blue. Some things to note here is you want to make sure that the parameter blue is wrapped in double quotes. If you did something like this, that is not going to work. It needs to be in double quotes. So now at this point, we can try to actually run this program, and we should see a blue canvas on the screen. So I'm going to save this. Now, what's the next thing we need to do to actually run this? Remember, JavaScript is only one component in the 3 components that exist for a web application. We need to link our JavaScript into our HTML. So let's go ahead and open our index.html file. Let's find that line where it either says first program or sketch1, and we're just going to replace that with sketch2. Now this auto completes for you, kind of nice. So we could say, boom, we want sketch2. We'll save that. And then we're going to go back to our dashboard and hit run. And we should see a blue square. I did not, in this environment, I didn't remove my IMA box yet. So let me go ahead and just do that. That is all of the text inside of this body. So our body should be completely empty. And there we go. We have a blue kind of rectangle square that is just 500 by 500 pixels. One new piece of information I want to show you here, and we'll go over this in class as well, but I encourage you to check this out. If we take a look at the P5js reference, we have all of the different functions that we can use. Remember I mentioned this P5js is basically a collection of functions. That's a quasi-lie. It's a collection of functions, but it actually also has other stuff as well, other tools that we can use. Some of those are variables. These variables are pieces of information that we can reference that'll return information about the environment around us. So one thing that I'm thinking here is, okay, so we have this 500 by 500 square, but what if I wanted to make this the entire size of my screen? Now think about this for a second. The size of my screen may not be the size of your screen. So I can't just simply say, oh, that's easy. Let me go ahead and do this and say, I'm going to make this, say, 2500 by 1500. And let's see what happens. Ah, okay, so that's my entire screen now. It's actually more because I have scroll bars. So, boom, I solved the problem. I didn't really solve the problem. I just masked the problem because I just made this another fixed value that's just bigger than my screen. What if you had a bigger screen at home? It would not look like this. That is one of the really unique aspects about this medium for creation, is the fact that the screen size is dynamic. It changes. Your cell phone has a much different screen size than your desktop. And there are many different types of screen sizes. So to get around that, P5js has a couple of variables we can reference. There's display width, display height, window width, and window height. Now I think I'm going to use the window height, but let me go ahead and, so this is a system variable that stores the height of the inner window. It maps to the window.innerHeight. This is exactly what we want. So our browser, the Chrome browser, has a variable that does exactly this, window.innerHeight. And this is just basically just a reference to that. So what we can do is we could basically say, instead of this, we're going to say window width. Now watch your case with this. You want to make sure that that W is capitalized, and then window height. Same thing. You want to make sure that your H is capitalized. Now if we go to our sketch, look at this. It's a full blue screen, no scroll bars. The entire screen is now a blue canvas that we can write on. Awesome. Cool. So we're running. We got it linked into our index.html, and we have our setup function. Now that's all I'm going to include in our setup function. So now outside of this closed curly bracket, we're going to write our second required function, which is draw. So we're going to say function space draw, open and close parentheses, and then open and close curly brackets. Now, here's where we can get a little creative. We can try different things. What we did in class this week was we drew some circles to the screen using the ellipse function. Let's do the same thing. Let's go through that same process. And then what I'm going to leave you with today in this lesson is for you to explore different shapes using the P5js reference. So what I want you to do is I want you to go here and look at all of these different shape functions you have, specifically the 2D primitives. There's arc, ellipse, circle, line, point, quad, rect, square, and triangle. Try some of these. See how they work. You can click on them. You can explore some of the documentation, read about the parameters that you can pass to them. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to do exactly what we did in class. I'm going to take a look at the ellipse function and specifically look at the parameters. So it gets an X, Y, W, and H for the position in space, X and Y, and the width and the height. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say draw an ellipse, if I can spell it correctly, and I'll draw it at 100, 100, so X and Y of 100, and I'll make it 400 by 400 in size. And let's see what happens. Cool. We have a random circle just chilling there. Excellent. Now let's make it a little bit more interesting. Let's go ahead and maybe make this a random number. And this is what we did in class. We introduced a random number to our sketch. Now, remember, this draw function is called 30 times per second. So I'm going to put a little comment in here. This function is called 30 times per second. So that means that we have a render loop executing, which means we can do animations, right? So now that we have this frame rate, right? So frames per second, right? We now have the capability to draw to the screen in different places and visually see that change, that motion. So right now we don't see anything because we're just drawing on top of ourselves over and over again. Technically it is drawing 30 frames per second, but we can't see it. So another really cool function is the random function. And the random function is super useful because it gives us the capability to create random variables. These are variables or values that we don't know what the value is going to be, but we can constrain it. So random takes a couple of different parameters. If you see a bracket around parameters in the reference, that means that they're optional parameters. So optional parameters are ones that you don't need to supply. But if we do supply one, it's going to be the max number. So let's go back here, and I'm going to say, let's draw a random circle between 0 and 500, and then a random circle between 0 and 500 for both the x and the y. Now we'll make it the same size. So let's see how this works. Boom. All right. So now we've got this like crazy drawing thing going on with a bunch of circles coming on top of each other. Excellent. But you notice we have a lot of space that we're not using. How could we ensure that these circles will be drawn across the entire range of our screen when we don't know the screen size? Didn't we just solve that? We solved that with the window width and window height variables. So instead of putting 500 here, we could say window width. Again, watch your case. One thing I like to do is copy this, so Control C and Control V, just copy and paste. And now, boom, now we've got circles all over the place. They're everywhere. They're going to span the entire width and height of the screen. Now, let's explore a little bit. Let's play. Let's try to make the colors a little different. So we can use a function called fill, and that fill function is going to enable us to define what is the color of the brush that we're going to use when we paint something. So we could say here, let's go ahead, before the ellipse function, we're going to say fill. Whoop, that autocomplete gets me every time here. Fill, and we'll say red. Boom, now we've got red circles. Now notice how we have this kind of black stroke around the color. We could take that away, but if we did take that away, watch what's going to happen. There is a function called no stroke that allows us to take the stroke away. So if I say no stroke, and again, watch your case there, the screen is going to fill up and eventually just be completely red because we have no stroke around the circles. So interesting, that kind of stinks. So let's keep the stroke in there for now so we can actually see the circles. One other thing we can do is we could say no stroke and we can randomize the color. So the fill here takes in a color value. We spoke about this a little bit in class, where right now we're just using human names for English names for human names, English names for color, but the computer understands color a little bit differently than we do. Remember, I mentioned that we have red, green, and blue channels. We can control those channels, and each channel is represented by a number. So we could represent red by saying, hey, I want to turn on the red channel all the way, which the max value is 255, but turn off the green and the blue channels. Now, this is going to give us the same exact result. We have a bunch of red circles drawn to the screen. But now, I don't want to make it all red, right? So I want to randomize these numbers. So if we add random numbers to each channel, so I'm going to say random with a max of 255 in all of these parameters. Now this is going to be a great workout for you guys because there's a lot of kind of syntax management going on here, right? We're making 3 function calls inside of 1 function by passing 3 random parameters to it. So this gets funky because you want to make sure that you have your parentheses in the right space and it's on the right line. So I would recommend you pause the video here and really pay attention to the code that we're writing and get it down in your environments exactly how you see it. And try to play with it too. Maybe change some of these numbers and see what happens. But now if we run this, now we have a bunch of random colored circles. All right, excellent. That's cool. Now, one other thing I'll show you, and then I'm going to leave you guys to play on your own, is there is another channel here. There is what we call an alpha channel. And the alpha channel allows us to define an opacity. So we can make the actual fill transparent. So if we make that a random value, or if we actually, let's not make it random for now. I'm going to make it 0.1. And you can see that we see right through these circles. There's nothing happening here. It actually kind of looks cool. There's a cool emerging pattern happening with just the stroke, but we don't see anything. So let's make this a little higher. Let's go up to like 60. Look at that. Now we have this kind of like stained glass look happening where we can see through all of our circles and we still get that stroke overlap. That's kind of cool. We could, if we wanted to, randomize the size of the stroke, right? Instead of no stroke, we could say stroke and we can give it a value. And say we give it a value of 23, just a random number. That didn't really do much for us. What if we made it like 255? Oh, that's actually the stroke color. So we made the color white, which is cool. Excellent. Actually looks, I like that. I like the way that looks. So what I'll do is I'll leave you with this. What I'd like you to do is do what we just did together here. Most of you have it kind of complete with what we did in class, but I want you to try a different function other than the ellipse or the circle. I want you to try to draw something other than a circle to the screen and play around with the numbers. Try to change what the look and feel of this is. Maybe you don't want to use random positioning. Maybe you want to make a fixed position or something like that and just change the colors. But play and just explore and see what you can come up with. All right? Have fun.